Yes, we are streaming.
Yes, so as you are ready.
All right. Good evening. I will bring the meeting of the August 3rd, 2020 San Carlos Planning Commission to order. We begin these meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. If I could please have a roll call, Lisa.
Commissioner Dugan. Commissioner Dugan, you may be
here.
Thank you. Commissioner Iacopone.
Here.
Commissioner Bradley.
Present.
Vice Chair Ruth.
Here.
And Chair Garvey.
Present. All right, moving on. Next on the agenda is public comment. Public comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have a matter placed on a future Commission agenda for a more comprehensive action or report. Is there anyone who'd like to speak tonight on an item that is not on the agenda?
And through the chair, we'll give it just a couple of minutes to see if there's anyone that may be watching from home on TV or online, so that they have a moment to call in on the number identified on the screen here. And Sarah, you can just let us know if you have someone in the room.
There is no one at this time.
All right, let's move on to the next agenda item. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our July 20th, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes? Any of my fellow commissioners?
None here.
None for me.
Looks good.
None for me.
All right, hearing that, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I hereby move to approve the minutes of our last meeting. This is Commissioner Dugan.
Bradley seconds.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Dugan.
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone.
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley.
Yes.
Vice Chair Ruth.
Yes.
And Chair Garvey.
Yes. All right, the next item on our agenda is the public hearing for 993 Laurel Street. I'll read a few statements from the agenda. Staff will present a report on the history, physical features, etc. on the application, followed with the staff's recommendations. The applicant will make a presentation. Thereafter, interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed and no further discussion from the floor can be held. The Commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speakers will be called upon by the last 3 digits of their phone number and should state their name prior to addressing the Commission. This will assist staff in preparing the minutes. Our public hearing this evening is 993 Laurel Street, APNs 051-358-290 and 051-358-240, PLN 2019-00053. Approve the request of Hayes Group Architects for a design review, conditional use permit, transportation demand management plan, and waiver for the development of a new 21,483 square foot 3-story mixed use building. Does staff have a presentation on this item?
Yes, we do, Chair Garvey. Staff tonight is Stephanie Bertolo Davis. She is our principal planner. She will be making the presentation this evening.
Go to the lower left corner of the Zoom.
And if I could just ask everyone to mute their
you when the time
mute
comes.
their microphones. Sounds like we're getting some feedback. Thank you. And then I will go ahead and mute myself and turn it over to Stephanie. Stephanie, just let me know when you want me to advance to the next slide.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, Commissioners. Stephanie Davis here. If we could get to the first slide, please. Tonight, you are being asked to consider both design review, a conditional use permit, a transportation demand management or TDM plan, and waiver for development at 993 Laurel Street. Next slide, please. So the proposal itself is for a new mixed-use 3-story commercial and office building, which is located on the corner of Laurel Street and Morse Boulevard. Here's a rendering of that, an isometric. If you're looking at the site in the corner, we'll get into more discussion on the building design in a bit. Next slide, please. So the site itself is a corner site. It consists of 2 parcels, which are totaling approximately 9,000 square feet in area. Each of those lots has 1 existing single-story commercial building on it, 1 currently occupied by a salon use, 1 previously occupied by a salon use that I've learned has since vacated about a year or so ago. These 2 lots would propose to be merged as part of the overall development scheme. I did want to note that the property owners of both parcels are also the business owners of the larger salon, which faces Laurel Street. The parcel is zoned mixed use and does allow for a choice of residential, commercial, and/or office uses, or a combination of any of those approved uses. The applicant does note that the building itself was designed to accommodate 1 retail tenant and 2 office tenants. Existing office uses do occur to the north and the west of the site, a motel directly behind it to the east, and a mixed-use multifamily residential office building directly across the street to the south across Morse Boulevard. Next slide, please. So I'll get into a discussion of the 4 requested entitlements before you tonight, beginning first with design review. Next slide, please. So what we see here, the proposed color and material board, as well as that same isometric drawing, looking at it kitty corner at Laurel and Morse. So the overall building is described as a warm, modern architectural type style. The facade itself will be predominantly finished in a smooth brick sandstone color, which is interplayed with mid-toned gray horizontal metal panels. It's further accentuated with dark brown metal spandrels, lighter gray aluminum framed windows. We'll get into each of the 4 elevations as we move forward. Next slide, please. So starting with the front of the building or along the Laurel Street facade, the main building entry is proposed at this elevation to both the ground floor retail and to the 2 office spaces above at the 2nd and 3rd floor. The building is framed with ceiling to floor transparent glass doors and windows, also framed with colored integrated metal canopies at that 1st story. At the 3rd floor, there is a small enclosed outdoor terrace at its southern end, or closest to that adjacent sort of 1-story white mottled block building on your elevation to the left. Next slide, please. Moving to the exterior side or the southern elevation, which faces Morse Boulevard, as well as to the rear elevation, which faces the public alley or towards El Camino Real. So the exterior side elevation, which faces Morse, does include a recessed 3rd story and additional covered terrace at its eastern end of the building. The ground floor includes raised planter boxes and 3 live green screen walls, which screen the parking area behind it. At the rear of the building, the same color and material scheme and floor-to-ceiling windows is carried throughout in its design. Vehicle access to the site is off of the rear elevation, specifically from the public alley, which has an existing curb cut from Morse Boulevard. Speaking of curb cuts, the existing curb cut, which provides access to the existing surface parking lot, will be removed and effectively can contribute towards the addition of on-street parking by removing such curb cut. Next slide, please. So this slide, I'd like to begin by discussing the parking layout for the site. I just described how access to the parking garage is proposed, so let me go through and explain this slide a bit. So again, accessing the covered first story, 1-story parking garage from the rear off of the public alley, there are a total of 31 on-site parking spaces proposed. The municipal code has a technical requirement of 25 parking spaces. The existing conditions of that surface lot that I just mentioned include, I believe, 17 parking spaces. So there will be a net addition of on-site parking spaces proposed. Now you can see the colored shapes. I'm using these colored shapes to describe the type of on-site parking proposed. In summary, of those 31 spaces, there are a total of 7 standard spaces. Of those 7 standard spaces, there is 1 regular space, which is delineated by the orange circle. And when I say regular space, it's just 1 open 8.5 by 18 space available for a user of the site. You can see that orange circle in the top right corner of the site plan, or excuse me, the floor plan of the first floor. So moving from that orange circle to the left, you see 3 stars. Those 3 stars denote the 3 proposed carpool spaces for the parking garage. Continuing to move to the left, you see 3 squares. Those 3 orange squares delineate the 3 required handicap spaces for the site. Now moving across the parking garage to the opposite end, you see 3 triangles. Each orange triangle is meant to delineate the 3 tiered parking lift systems which are proposed. Later on in the applicant's presentation, they will be showing a video that depicts how these parking lift systems actually maneuver, but I will just describe it briefly verbally right now. So within each of those 3 tiered systems, there are a total of 8 available parking spaces. Although there are technically 9 space areas, that 1 additional space is left open to accommodate the shift of the parking lifts as they move up, down, and over. Again, more clearly to be displayed in the applicant's video that will be forthcoming during their presentation. So these parking lift systems do offer they are self-automated, meaning that a user will be able to park their vehicle within one of these lift systems via a keyless fob or remote control or via an app on their smartphone or smart device. If you can see the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, that shows just example photos of what the remote control and or keyless fob box would look like. But moving to the left on the bottom of the screen is an actual picture of a similar parking lift system. And then moving further to the left is a section drawing that shows how those parking spaces will be accommodated in that 3-tiered lift program. So the bottommost parking spot will be a pit, so to speak, in the ground. the middle parking space being at ground level, and then of course the uppermost parking space being above. The proposed parking height garage has been designed to provide adequate clearance for the parking of 3 SUV vehicles under a worst case scenario that was evaluated. Moving on from the conversation of the parking lift systems themselves, in terms of the parking requirements, the municipal code has no technical requirement for providing any parking for the ground floor retail space, as the square footage of the area is less than 1,500 square feet. However, the applicant is proposing to dedicate one of those standard spaces that I described previously for the retail, should they need it. Next slide, please. So moving on to the landscaping component of the design review. So landscaping is proposed along the street frontages, both at Laurel and Morse Boulevard, as well as within both of those 3rd-story terraces that front both Laurel and Morse. Along the Laurel Street facade, 2 street trees and planted areas both along the building's edge, as well as within the public right-of-way or towards the street, of various shrubs, grasses, and ground cover are proposed. Staying on the Laurel elevation at its 3rd floor terrace, there are raised planter boxes that are proposed at both ends of that terrace. You can see everything on the screen there with the 1st floor plan being at the top and the 3rd floor plan being at the bottom right. Anything that's shaded in green indicates plantings or vegetation. So moving along to the Morse Boulevard elevation, there are 2 additional street trees to be planted and also a planter box area directly abutting the building along its entire lineal frontage that also will include other shrubs, plantings, and ground covers. Now this elevation also has 3 live green screen walls towards the end or the eastern end of the building. Those live green screen walls will screen the parking area with climbing vines combined with other plantings. Similar to the Laurel Street elevation, the 3rd-story terrace along Morse also has raised planters at both of its ends. So in addition to plants and trees, the landscaping plan also includes a pedestrian bench, which would be situated within the public right-of-way for public use, decorative pedestrian pavers along all public sidewalk area on both sides of the building, decorative bicycle racks, as well as pedestrian pole lighting. It is noted that prior to any building permit issuance, the municipal code does require a detailed lighting plan to meet its zoning standard minimum requirements, such as specificity in illumination, control of outdoor light, the type of fixtures that can be lit to shield spillover, as well as create a situation where there would be non-obtrusive glare produced from the type of lighting. The lighting details included in the plans at this point in the process do include outdoor wall sconces, which are downlit and meet the minimum illumination standards that the municipal code specifies. So in summary, and for the reasons as further detailed within the staff report, it is found that the application does meet all of the required design review guidelines specified for design review of a new building. Next slide, please. So the second requested entitlement before you tonight is for a conditional use permit, or CUP. The CUP is proposed for the proposed location of the on-site parking, specifically within 40 feet of a street-facing property line. So the enclosed surface parking, as I previously discussed, does meet all other development standards of the San Carlos Municipal Code. Its enclosure is screened from view through both its situation on the lot as well as the 3 live green screen walls. These factors combined with the relatively narrow nature, elongated nature of the lot, 75-foot width with about 120-foot depth, does reduce design options that would allow for either at-grade parking or subterranean parking to physically be located less than 40 feet from a property line, since it is a corner lot. So for these reasons, and as further specified within the staff report, it is found that the proposal to locate street parking less than 40 feet from a street-facing property line does meet the 3 required findings in order for a conditional use permit to be considered. Next slide, please. So the third requested entitlement before you tonight is the approval of the proposed Transportation Demand Management, or TDM plan. So as this development does include construction of a new building greater than 10,000 square feet, non-residential in its use, the municipal code does require implementation of a TDM plan. So the purpose of such a plan is to reduce the traffic that's generated by a project, to promote more efficient and alternative transportation usage and mode, as well as establishing the ongoing monitoring of such a plan for each development that implements it. So a TDM was developed for this project, which identifies specific trip reduction measures to meet these purposes and was tailored to the nature of the proposed uses and location of the building, which ultimately reduces vehicle trips to the site by 20%. So the types of measures to get such a reduction are included here on the screen and are detailed in more specificity within the staff report. The TDM plan is found to meet all of the performance requirements and findings as specified in the municipal code in order to consider its approval. Next slide, please. So the last requested entitlement before the commission tonight associated with this project is the request for a waiver. So a waiver allows for minor relief from a development standard, up to 10% of such standard. In this instance, the applicant is requesting a waiver to reduce the standard requirement of a 16-foot ground floor height for non-residential uses down to 15 feet 4 inches. The purpose of such request is that this slightly lesser height does reduce the overall height and scale of the building itself, as well as allowing it better compatibility and alignment with the adjacent one-story building to the north along Laurel Street, as well as to other one or lower story buildings in the immediate neighborhood. And again, as specified within the staff report in greater detail, it is found that the project does meet the required findings in order for a waiver to be considered. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a bit about the public notice that was sent out by the city, as well as the public outreach efforts that were conducted by the project applicant. So the applicant initially conducted public outreach back in February of 2019. A summary of the attendees of that meeting, as well as their concerns, have been included within the staff report. But in summary, the concerns expressed by those neighbors that did attend related primarily to parking, views, privacy, and construction. The applicant did discuss and address those concerns at that meeting. In addition to that public outreach that was conducted back in February of last year, the applicant also obtained 13 letters of support from neighbors and other community members within San Carlos. Those letters are also included as attachments to the staff report. At the point when the package was distributed, The city also received one additional letter of support, also included within the packet. Now, post-packet distribution, there were 3 items, additional items of public comment received on the project, 2 items of public support of the project, and 1 item that expressed a series of questions and concerns related to the project. Those questions and concerns were responded to, and the inquirer had no further comments or questions. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have. I know that the project applicant, as I mentioned before, does have a presentation. Both the property owner and lead architect are intending to speak tonight, as well as a team. The project team has several other members in their areas of specificity, including people who prepared the TDM plan, engineers, etc. So with that, staff does move that the Planning Commission grant approval for the design review, conditional use permit, transportation demand management plan, and waiver to allow this new 21,483 square foot, 3-story mixed-use building at 993 Laurel Street for the reasons as incorporated and enumerated in the staff report, and with the conditions as listed in the code compliance certificate / conditional use permit. Thank you. So that.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
I just want to compliment you on a job very well done. I think this is the first time I've heard you present to this Planning Commission, and very, very well done. Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie. This is Commissioner Dugan. Just have a couple quick questions for you. I'm looking at the applicable standards, and first, so I see maximum height of 50 feet. Is that so? That can allow up to 4 stories, and I'm just trying to figure that out. So we actually have 16 feet ground floor minimum height. And then what does the minimum first floor of 12 feet then mean?
The interior.
I see. So like if there's like a suspended ceiling or something, it can't be below 12 feet.
Drop ceiling, yes.
Okay, got it. And then what is the motivation as a city that we have for 16-foot minimum height? I realize we're being asked to grant them an exception, and I'm generally supportive of that given it aligns with the neighbors and it does reduce the mass of the building. But why are we driving for 16-foot ground floors?
I would say that the intent or the purpose of that development standard would be to an attempt at increasing transparency at the ground floor, particularly for mixed-use buildings, so that you have more glass and light, more of a pedestrian-friendly type of design element, I guess I would describe it.
I see. Okay. And we don't think the 15-foot 4-inch is going to have an impact on that?
We found that the remaining design component elements of the building are still able to meet the overall spirit and intent of those guidelines, even with the 8-inch reduction in first floor height.
Okay. And then the blank wall, that's like the maximum height of a wall with no windows in it. Am I reading that correctly?
Excuse me for a moment, get there. Yes, so that would be with no windows, no fenestration, no type of articulation or exterior element added, just a plain surface wall of whatever the material may be.
Okay, and we don't have anything like that on this building except what's facing its side neighbor, is that correct?
And that's less than 25 feet, yes, on the northern end of the building.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Stephanie. That's all I had for now.
This is Commissioner Roof, and I have one question, which is, would a sign be allowed to be placed on the building, either for the retail use or even up at the top there for the other tenants?
Yes, signage is definitely allowed, as well as that signage needing to go through the proper zoning clearance to demonstrate that it meets the sign requirements of the municipal code. So there's limitations on the amount of square footage based on the lineal length of the buildings, as well as its placement, height, lighting, etc. So if signage is ever proposed down the line, a separate planning department application would be required.
So at the top of the building, there's a fair amount of the sandstone colored solid stucco, probably, that I can imagine a sign there would be pretty impactful to the overall look of the building, but I guess it requires imagination because it's not shown on the pictures. But is that where a sign could potentially go?
I would need to, or I'd want to look at the city's current sign ordinance just to make sure that I'm versed in what the current requirements are. Lisa, I don't know if you happen to know those off the top of your head, but I don't believe you can have signage over a certain height. But again, I'd really want to take a look at the specificity of the development standards for signage, which I can certainly do right now.
That's correct, Stephanie. Yes, I'm not muted. Just wanted to be sure. But there are placement requirements for where the signage could be allowed, as well as a maximum area, depending on the frontage, the length of the building. So that's something that staff would evaluate, and maybe I can try to bring the elevation back up. You're saying along the front of it, the Laurel side. Yeah, signage, we've seen signage, kind of could be proposed at the top of the first floor area. You could also do projecting signage. I'm trying to think of the exact term, but it kind of projects out from the face of the wall. That has been done really nicely on other buildings along projects in the downtown area. So there's several options. It doesn't necessarily need to be wall mounted. There could be a combination of signs that could address and to identify the uses on site.
And could there be a sign above the third floor?
There's no roof mounted signs. They're not allowed.
Well, on the vertical surface above the third floor, there's kind of a large, that's where the big sandstone colored surface area is.
Yeah, there could be potentially. If that's an option. I don't know if the team has any thoughts on that, but they may have some. But signage sometimes typically comes later.
If I may, through the chair, just looking at the municipal code chapter regarding signage, it does look that any signs that exceed 25 feet in height would trigger an additional planning commission review. So without having the plans in scale, presumably the height at that sandstone strip, so to speak, at the uppermost part of the building exceeds 25 feet in height. So if any signage was proposed, it would trigger planning commission review.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions from the commissioners of the staff before we go to the applicant?
Hi, Stephanie, Commissioner Iacopone. How are you tonight?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Good, and nice job as well in the presentation. A quick question, shifting over to the interior parking. There was a note in our packet regarding the handicap parking, and it says the applicant proposes that the landlord will reserve the right to reallocate the 2 handicap parking stalls based on the actual need for the 3 tenants, including both a permanent or short-term handicap requirement. Can you just explain what that means?
Yes, so from a building code perspective, or how the technical requirement is derived, it's based on the use and the square footage of such uses. The allocation of those spaces are going to be at the purview, in this case, of the tenant, or excuse me, the landlord, who would be managing those tenants. I would ask that more specificity on how that process will be thought through to have the project applicant touch on that during their presentation.
So because you're saying that the city does not have any requirement for a minimum standard on handicap parking in this situation.
There's a minimum standard in terms of the amount of handicap parking that must be provided in a development based on its uses and square footage. How those are allocated in multi-tenant buildings would not be under the purview of the city.
Okay, well, maybe I'll follow up with the project team when they get on board. I'm sure there's a real simple thing, and thank you. That's good.
Stephanie, this is Ellen. I had two questions. The first relates to rideshare. Once this property is populated and ride shares are back in the picture, where do you envision that rideshare drop-offs or DoorDash drop-offs will be happening for this property?
Yes, so I did discuss this issue, and I know the project applicant will be speaking to it as well, but I'll just give a brief overview of the feedback that I received on that matter. So right now, those stops do obviously occur for very short periods of times. They're not controlled within the city. There's no municipal code requirement. However, with that said, the most likely location would be around the Morse Boulevard elevation, likely not off of the back alley or within the site, only because that, if it happened at night, there could be some concerns of those customers waiting and it not being well lit and or safe for those users. The applicant also does propose the idea, since there is a public pedestrian bench at the corner of Laurel and Morse being proposed as part of this for general use, that customers using these types of rideshare organizations could wait theoretically on that bench or in that area for the vehicles to pick them up.
Thank you. Thank you. That sounds good. A second and last question. I was reading in the packet about a commercial linkage fee. Can you briefly explain what is a commercial linkage fee and where do these monies go?
Sure. I'll give the brief overview, and then Lisa, if you wouldn't mind stepping in if there's any big ticket item that I forgot to mention. So the commercial linkage fee is established as an impact of, in this case, a retail or office building having on the potential associated housing demand within the city. So that commercial linkage fee is a fee that is intended to offset any housing impacts that could be associated with its development. And such fees get deposited in the city's housing fund for specific housing purposes, whether that's the city having their own housing project or working with another housing type of organization in creating affordable housing elsewhere within the community.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff before we hear from the applicant? All right, does the applicant have a presentation this evening?
We do.
And through the chair and for everyone else, John or Ken, the last I looked, you both, oh wait, just check.
Hi, Lisa.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Let me make sure that Jim and Angie have their mute button off. Are they there?
Do. Yeah,
they're
we're
there.
here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Angie and Jim, go ahead. Take it away.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jim DePaula, and I'm here with my wife, Angie. We are the current owners of the building and the business that is located at 993 Laurel Street, currently Headline Salon. Angie and I are lifetime Peninsula residents. Both of us were born at Sequoia Hospital, and we have literally lived here all of our lives. I purchased my first business in San Carlos In September 1983, it was an existing hair salon at 647 and 649 Laurel, now occupied by Susie Cakes. About 3.5 years later, we purchased our first home here on Cordilleras Avenue and began raising the first of our 3 children there. And after 17 years of growing my business, I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase the building at 993 Laurel from Bill and Rosalie Becker. When we purchased the building 20 years ago, it was our long-term plan and vision to ultimately redevelop the property into a real estate project that could help support us going into our retirement years. And in addition, to provide long-term value for our 3 children as the cornerstone of our estate planning. As both Angie and I have been self-employed for really all of our adult lives. So after 37 years of operating a business on Laurel Street, that time has come for us. In 2017, we took the first step in this process by selecting JMS Development as our joint venture partner. And over the last 2.5 years, JMS Development and myself have worked with city staff on multiple plan iterations. This cooperative process has resulted in the enclosed project development plan that is before you this evening. In closing, I would like to say how blessed and lucky I have been to work a mile from my home for 37 years. I'd just like to thank all of you for your consideration of our proposed project at 993 Laurel, and we would very much appreciate your support. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce our project architect, Ken Hayes, with the Hayes Group Architects. Ken will be presenting the project details to you this evening.
Great. Thanks, Jim and Angie. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Chair Garvey, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Ken Hayes with Hayes Group Architects. As Jim and Angie said, I'll be presenting the project on behalf of the team. I am joined tonight by the rest of the team. So we have our landscape architect here, Gary Lehman. We have our civil engineer, BKF, Isaac Kontrovsky with them. We have our TDM plan engineer, Elizabeth Hughes with TDM Specialties. And we have Mike Jones with Klaus, the parking lift system, to answer any questions that you might have. They're not going to be involved in the presentation. It'll take too long. So they're here to answer any questions that you have. Before I start, I'd like to thank Stephanie Bertola-Davis and Lisa Porras. And Stephanie, that was a fabulous staff report and presentation. So I would agree with the commissioners. I'm going to say next slide, and I guess that's how we'll operate. Next. Next. So the project site is a corner site, and there'll be a little bit of repeat here on the corner of Laurel and Morris. Next slide. It is in the mixed use downtown zoning district, allowing for a 2.5 FAR and a 50-foot height limit. It consists of 2 sites. Next slide. One is 993 Laurel, the namesake. That's where Headlines is. And then site number 2 is 1150 Morse. And that's where TLC is, which was the nail salon. Next slide. Next slide. This is just giving you the overall context of the site in the fabric of the downtown. It is a 9,000 square foot parcel. Next site or slide. Existing views of the site on the left-hand side, we have the animal dental clinic. Next to that is Headlines. Very little landscaping, no street amenities, no street trees. The slide on the right is from the corner. You can see there's trash and recycling receptacles next to Headlines on the sidewalk. And again, no street trees, no street amenities. Next slide. A little bit more of a close-up of the nail salon. You can see the alley just sort of on the right-hand side of the nail salon. And you see the parking lot there on the left for Headlines. And then just next to that is the trash and recycling facility. Again, very, very little landscaping, kind of harsh, and no street trees. On the right-hand side is from the alley looking south, the gray building and that little parking area with the blue recycling can has about 3 cars, and the gray area, the gray building rather, is the nail salon. Next slide. Next slide. The goals for the project are to redevelop the site with increased building density in this downtown location, Anchor the corner with a key building feature and enhance the pedestrian experience with shop fronts and landscaping. Provide a mixture of uses within and reference existing street context, materials, and building rhythm of the street. Next slide. We have some precedents. Next slide. And these are just photographs of just images of other buildings that we've derived some of the characteristics from. So they're all warm, modern, brick clad. This building is almost entirely clad in brick. So it is not stucco. These buildings show very modern, sharp cutouts, black metal trim, and wood clad canopies that surround the building, as well as landscaping up next to the building and a plinth. The building on the right is a building in downtown San Carlos that we worked with JMS Development Partners on and finished a couple years ago. That's where Dwell is located. There are other brick buildings in the downtown, Tivoli, the Wells Fargo, and many other retail storefronts. We feel like brick is a high quality material that does reference some of the historic building patterns and materials in the downtown. Next slide. Next slide. This is the site plan. Morse is at the bottom. El Camino obviously is on the far right, and then you see Laurel Street there. Next slide. I'm going to kind of just walk through the rationale. So there is a 5-foot setback on the Morse side. That's a code requirement, site development requirement. And we've used that to provide landscaping, street trees, and then a raised planter with a seat wall running down that side on Morse. Next slide. There's also a setback on Laurel. It actually is a 15-foot setback from the face of curb. So that means it's about a 2'9" setback from the property line. So we've recessed the building in from the property line as a code requirement to, again, provide landscaping and amenities for kind of a pedestrian zone along the sidewalk. We are replacing all of the sidewalk surfaces, adding the bench, and providing decorative pavers in between the trees along both frontages. Next slide. Entrances are provided off of Laurel. These are the main entrances to the building. The blue area is the office lobby, and we felt it was more appropriate to have the retail space on the corner for obvious exposure reasons, and so the other entrance is there. Next slide is going to show you how we've wrapped that retail space with almost full height glass to really maximize the transparency both in and out to, again, activate the sidewalk when retail is thriving again. Next slide. So the access is a logical place off the alley. We have utilities off the alley, but the vehicular access comes in an existing driveway cut. We're removing the other driveway cut on Morse to get into the garage. Next slide. On the left-hand side of the garage are the parking lifts, and there are 31 spaces in the garage, and I think Ms. Davis went through that pretty thoroughly. Next slide. Shows the entrance from the garage into that common lobby, and from that common lobby you can also get into the retail space or take the elevator or stairs up in the building. Next slide is going to show you where we have the utility in the bottom right-hand corner. That's where we have the trash and recycling facilities that you can get to from the parking garage, or for pickup days, there's an opening on the alley, and so we'll bring the cans out. They can pick it up there. Next slide. Let me say the building is about 21,488 square feet, but this garage area is nearly 6,000 square feet of that 21,000. So the actual net occupiable building area is just somewhere a little bit over 15,000 square feet. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is the second floor. The second floor has a footprint of about 7,200 square feet, hard to find in the downtown. It's surrounded on 3 sides by windows where we can have daylight access the space. Next slide is going to indicate where we've organized all of the vertical circulation elements nicely along one wall. It leaves a very clean floor plate. Both stairs, elevator, toilet cores will be along that common interior side property line, which typically ends up being a blank wall, but we have punctuated it with a window at the stair. Next slide will show the third floor, a little bit different. Again, we have windows on 3 sides. The next slide will show you the core, how that's been defined. Next slide, there you go. And then the next slide shows the terrace on the front overlooking Laurel. That's the one on the left. And at the bottom of the screen, or the slide rather, is the terrace that overlooks Morse and a little bit of the alley. There's about 900 square feet of terrace shown, and this floor plate is about 6,300 square feet. Next slide. Next slide. So this shows the street view, kind of putting it in context. The building is obvious there on the corner. It anchors the corner. It defines the street edge both on Morse and on Laurel if you're headed down Laurel. And it actually provides a nice transition now from the new building 2 doors to the left and to 1001 Laurel, the condominium mixed use project on the right. Next slide. There you go. So detail of the elevation, simple rectangular form. Like I said, it's clad in brick. There's a rhythm of openings at the bottom that provides a nice syncopation along the street that is consistent with kind of downtown rhythms, which are critical. There's a large cutout above, kind of supported on that rhythm of columns that defines the 2 office floors. But again, it is also subdivided again by these metal columns or details that create a rhythm at that 2nd and 3rd floor area. The 2 openings in the upper left-hand part of that window area, that's where that balcony overlooks Laurel. And metal canopies at the ground floor wrap the entire ground floor of the building to provide protection at the entries and at the building windows so people can come up to the building and not get wet. Next slide will take us around the corner. We're taking the same building vocabulary around the corner to define that corner block and the cutout. But then the building steps back after we've defined the block. The building steps back, it modulates a little bit. The materials change. It becomes a little more finely detailed where we have the balcony. And again, a rhythm of columns that support a wood trellis above that 3rd floor balcony that you have there. On the ground floor, the base is defined by actually the precast concrete base wraps all the way around the building, but in this case on Morse, the precast base becomes a planter and a seat wall, so anyone could sit along this on this seat wall and just take a break if they like. Behind them would be vegetation in the planter, and then we have these 8-foot tall green screens that conceal the openings into the parking garage area. Next slide. This is the common property line side. The building, the big white blank in the bottom right-hand corner, that's the building next door, the veterinary or the animal hospital. The brick would continue on this side. It defines the base of the building still, so then that wraps around. Then above that, we have a metal siding. Next slide. Is the alley side of the building. So that brick base wraps around and then runs down Morse. The entrance to the garage occurs here. There will be a canopy at that entrance to the garage so that when you come into the garage, it'll have a higher end feel. On the left-hand side, you can see the articulation of the balcony, the railings, and the trellis that will then run down Morse. Next slide. There you go. Thank you. This is the perspective that you've already seen. It shows a very nice palette of materials. We have this smooth brick veneer, clear glass so that you can see into the building, high performance glass. We've got the precast concrete base, street trees, new sidewalk. You see the park bench there. And then if you look in the cutout, like the balcony up on the 3rd floor on the upper left-hand side of this rendering, you can see the wood soffit ceiling that occurs up there. So when you look up into the building, you feel very warm. The same thing occurs on the far right-hand side where we have the 3rd floor terrace. When you look up into the building, it's not a weather-protected area, but it's a wood trellis that is inserted in between the metal structure there. Next slide. Just we can run through these pretty quickly. This gives you an idea of the block of building mass that's defining the corner and how it modulates when it runs down Morse. Next slide. Again, from Laurel looking south, you can see how the building next door aligns with the bottom of the windows at the second floor. That's part of the reason for asking for the height reduction. Next slide. Again, from Morse, gives you an idea of looking in the alley. I think staff had this in their presentation. Next slide. All right, so here's the video. And why don't you go ahead and play the video. This is how the car lifts work. And as I said earlier, Mike Jones from Klaus is here. If there's volume, you might want to turn the volume up. The music's not playing, so I'm not sure how you do that. Oh, there you go. Oh, it's up, huh? Well, just pay attention to the... So there'll be a pit in the building, and the car can go down into the pit. On average, it takes about 30 seconds to park a car. Sometimes it could take as much as a minute, but never more. You have to get out of the car in order to shut the gate for protection. And you can enter that lift at any point. So it's not a predefined place where you go in. It's wherever the fastest space is available in the lift that you've been assigned to. And I'm sure there's going to be questions on this, and Mike Jones is more qualified to answer those should you have them. And this is a 3-level lift, just like the one in the proposed project. There you go. Next slide. So why did we choose to work with Klaus parking systems? Well, they're worldwide. They're made in Germany. Next slide. You can see where they are around the world. But in California, they're based in Berkeley. They are used by more than 750,000 users on a daily basis around the world. In California since 1996, and here used by 7,800 people on a daily basis. And they have 300 locations in California, and most of them are concentrated, as you can see here in the Bay Area. As I said, made in Germany, very reliable. They do have 12 service engineers on the West Coast, should they be needed. These are also on a service plan, but there is a lifetime warranty. So that concludes my next slide. That concludes my presentation. Again, I want to thank staff for their wonderful staff report and presentation, and we ask for your support of staff's recommendation for approval of this Class A office retail mixed use project, and we are all happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. This is Ellen. Do any of my colleagues have any questions of the applicant or the architect or any member of their team that's here this evening?
Thank you.
Bradley here. I'll start off with a real picky thing that I may have misinterpreted it, but from the landscape plan and the lighting plan, it looks like your street lights are going to be right in the street tree planting. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm sure you wouldn't want that to happen. Thank you.
There's a light right here. Can you see what I'm circling?
I'm sorry, but I can't see the screen and you can't see me.
I'm sorry. Okay.
But I can understand if you explain it. Thank you.
So there, Commissioner Bradley, there are 3 street lights that are part of the project. 2 of them on Morse, and one of them, and 2 of those, there's 2 clustered at the corner. One's on Laurel, one's on Morse, and one's down towards the alleyway. The street lights are in the planters or next to the planters in the decorative paving, I believe, that are next to them.
Okay, I just was concerned that the lights might be right in near the trunk of the trees. And
oh no, they are not.
Okay, good
point. Yep.
Thank you.
They're at least 10 to 20 feet away from the trees, probably.
Very good. Thank you.
Hi, David Roof here, and I'm wondering, I was happy to see that the number of parking spaces exceeds the minimum required for the square footage, but how many people would be expected to work in the office space? I noticed it was one parking spot per 450 square feet, which is a pretty big area for one person. Probably you'd have a lot more than one person per 450 square feet. So what's the anticipated?
It's hard to, thank you for the question. It's hard to predict who the tenant might be, Commissioner Roof, although we are thinking that these would be higher end professional office type spaces. You're probably looking at an occupancy density of, somewhere around 4 to 5 people maybe per 1,000 square feet at the most. Maybe less than that now, given the new standards that are being studied by architects everywhere in terms of how to social distance. So on a 7,000 square foot floor plate, you could have, perhaps 28 to 35 total occupants. The second floor is 7,200 feet. The third floor, I think, is 6,300 feet. I think part of the standards that have been developed in San Carlos take into consideration that you're in the downtown. Not everybody's going to be driving, and that's also the purpose of the TDM plan, as you probably know.
Yes.
And I believe our peak trips, I believe, are reduced to like 27 total. I think in the morning and about 26 in the afternoon. So that's as close as I could get, at least on occupancy.
Yeah, it sounds like from the numbers you just rattled off, maybe a third of the occupants could have their own parking spot, and everybody else would either be carpooling or coming in on the train in that plan, which might happen. The street parking out front is not timed, so I suppose employees might just decide to park on the street all day, right?
Yeah, that's probably not where I would put my car, but I would, we felt like it was important to provide more parking than the minimum in the building, and that's why we went ahead with the 3-lift system.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, it does meet the standard. But I also suspect that it's going to have somewhat of an impact on the parking in the area. But
it'd be great to hear from Elizabeth Hughes, our TDM consultant, maybe on if you have a question for her regarding anticipated parking levels.
Elizabeth, do you take into account the impact on how much impact there'll be in the surrounding streets?
Thank you, by the way, Elizabeth Hughes, TDM specialist. We take into consideration the ITE counts for parking and parking that will be generated from the project uses, and on-street parking isn't necessarily part of that count because it's not on site to the project. But when we prepared the TDM plan, we did want to accommodate we wanted to have a more robust plan than, say, the basics. So we did overachieve the peak hour trip reduction counts according to the CCAG guidelines and policies. So we have accommodated for that, but normally it wouldn't be a part of specific projects impacts for TDM. But in this case, we have accommodated that with our TDM plan by default.
You might want to clarify CCAG.
CCAG, the City County Association of Governments for San Mateo County.
They reviewed your plan, correct?
Yeah, they actually reviewed our plan late in December last year, and they provided a letter of compliance that they found the document to meet their requirements of the policy. And they were pleased with the amount of TDM strategies that were identified for in the document to apply to that trip reduction. So we're reducing peak hour trips. We wanted to address peak hour trips, but also all trips.
Yeah, well, it is close to the train station, so I think it's reasonable that that quite a few people might come by that route.
Yeah, you actually have transit, about 4 lines of Samtrans that are within, one is within a 1/10 of a mile in terms of access, and the other is a 0.20 distance from the site. So it's a very walkable distance.
Okay, thank you. That answers my parking question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, Jim Nakaponi here. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good. Kind of a follow-up to David's question, and maybe this will sound a little more general at first, but the calculations that go into the or the data that goes into the calculations around trip reduction. Do you have any idea, is real world data brought in to like quality check that model like every couple of years? Because I think like David, you know, I believe in models, but I also believe that they're an idea. So I'm just curious, like, how do we know reality reduces trips? All of the things that are in our menu actually result in the reduction of trips in this kind of a development. What's the data to prove that?
That's a really good question. I would say that CCAG does have a trip count sort of menu for reductions. If you have a certain TDM strategy or a measure, their program equates count, and then we apply that, we sum that up and apply it to what the Institute of Transportation Engineers calculates for trips for the project. That's one way, but the CCAG policy is about 20 plus years old. And so what I do when I'm preparing a TDM plan, I look at not only the location of the project, its proximity to transit, its proximity to bike infrastructure, et cetera. But I also know from the programming components that I add into my plans, what kind of promotions are we going to have for carpooling and biking and transit and guaranteed ride home? And because I not only prepare these TDM plans, I actually implement them and I manage them in a number of places throughout the San Francisco Bay Area, predominantly in the peninsula. And so I have years and years of survey data, historical survey data that I know helps me as a practitioner know what strategy is going to work well at this site and might work better synergistically with this other measure. And so I put together this plan to really customize the outcome for the building. And we won't have a model to show the success of the program until a year after occupancy, and we have implemented the program. We've helped outreach to the tenant and all their employees. We engage them, and at the end of the year, we'll have an annual survey that's going to identify how well we did, either achieving the goal or making progress towards that goal. But really, there's a lot of background knowledge, having 20 plus years in the business of TDM, not just planning, but implementation and management that I bring to the table. So I'm very confident that the plan is going to achieve the goal. And then as the annual report will show, you'll have the data you're looking for. But there is no good model that I'm aware of that can predict this type of an outcome.
Yeah, great, thank you. You know, this will sound like putting you on the spot, but if you were to suggest what your track record is, are you like batting 900 between your proposed reductions and what you observe a year and two after?
You would use a baseball reference.
Yeah.
I don't know 900, but I can tell you of the projects that we're managing, we probably have an 85 to 90% success rate in meeting goals, and that's sustainable over multiple years. I do have a few projects that are in really challenging locations, not well located to transit and shuttles, that are not quite making those goals. But for the most part, we're quite successful in achieving a stated goal.
Great. Well, look, thank you for creating some confidence. This is a question that comes up as we review projects, and I'm not sure we've heard such a good explanation. So thanks for both the plan and your experience to give us a window into why we should believe it's going to work. So that's great.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. If I could just, Ellen, if I could just come back to this simple question on the handicap parking. Do I understand the point that was flagged in our background material, just to say that the landlord can pick which tenant gets the handicap, but not pick whether there's 0, 1, or 2? Was that the point of this?
Yeah. Excuse me, Ken, this is John Bear. Can I answer this one?
Sure. John's one of the owners.
Yeah. So I'd like to answer the question about the handicap. I'd also like to, if I could just just flashback for 1 second on the parking for the project. So, after 25 years and doing maybe 100 projects, I want to share with you the practical side of the parking solution here. In the old days, as you remember, it used to be 4 cars per 1,000. And then cities adjusted to 3 cars per 1,000. And now they're modifying down to somewhere between 2 and 2.5 cars per 1,000. And the reason is because there are now multiple modes of transportation for employees to get to their offices. And I think the truth is, if you were to go into garages that had 3 cars per 1,000, you would discover that they are virtually half empty. So that moderation from 4 to 3 to 2 is actually keeping up with the changes in transportation patterns. And all I would say here is we did feel that with the TDM, the 25 parking stalls was too light. And so we did increase it to 31. And I do believe that the 31 spaces, along with the transit and the phenomenal increase in ride share, the walkability of employees who live in the city, we're going to have sufficient parking. I mean, and again, we have to lease the building, and that's the first thing tenants ask. So I would just say, from a practical point of view, I feel the parking will be sufficient. With respect to the handicaps, the point that we were making is that you have 2 handicap stalls. You may have a tenant that has 2 handicap employees, so they actually need the 2 handicap stalls. Or you may have no handicap employees in either tenant, in which case those 2 stalls would remain open. All we want to do, and this is a rule we use in all our projects, is to be able to allocate the handicap stalls where they're needed most. And that's really the purpose of that paragraph, is to kind of match the availability of the handicap with the need for the handicap stalls on a tenant by tenant basis.
Thanks for your explanation.
This is Bradley again. A question for the architects.
Yes.
Did you consider all electric utilities?
Most likely, we're going to be nearly all electric. On this building, we're probably going to have a mechanical system that is not going to need gas. It'll be an electric VRF, a variable refrigerant fluid system that is really, really highly efficient, and it's all electric. There might be gas depending what happens at the retail, but I don't necessarily see where we're going to need gas in the office area.
I'm glad to hear that. So will you have solar roof panels?
we have the ability to install solar roof panels. We've kept the roof very clean and wide open, but we have not made that decision yet. There is a code requirement that we provide an area for solar panels for future installation, and we are seriously considering.
Yes, so you'll look at the cost-benefit ratio and see how long it takes to pay for itself, I suppose, and make a decision on that. Hopefully, it would.
And I think. Yeah, I mean, I think ownership is also pretty committed to sustainable practices, and that would be one of the key components.
Again, this is Jamir. If I can provide insight on the solar plan, we have several buildings, and 3 in San Carlos, and we are presently in dialogue with the solar installation firms to try to understand exactly how the solar installation and process works. And there are 3 buildings in San Carlos, including this one, that we believe would be appropriate for solar in the next literally 3 to 4 years. It's really more just sorting out the installation mechanics than anything else, because clearly these have got plenty of sun exposure and solar is viable. So we're really just in the early planning stages, but it's in the plan, and I think it'll be in place in the next 5 years.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, great. This is John Dugan. First, just want to congratulate Jim and Angie on, 2 local residents, business owners, getting a nice project done in town. So appreciate that. Congratulations, guys. Glad you're able to partner with John to get another good project in town. I think this is, it's a handsome building. I think office space is definitely needed in our downtown core. So I'm generally supportive. I appreciate the additional parking. I think it will be needed in this site. And I like that seat wall on the planter outside. I think that's a little human element people hanging out around the building are really going to appreciate. So I like little touches like that. Quick question for you, Ken. With the anticipated use, I'm assuming that's Class A office space. I didn't see any core facilities for a kitchen or, even a small office kitchen in there. Is that anticipated? Are those utilities already run there? It just, I'm sure any potential office user is going to want something like that. Just wondering what your thought was on that.
Yeah, Commissioner Dugan, thank you for that comment. Certainly, we'll have break areas. They're probably going to be connected to the balconies, at least on the 3rd floor. And so we didn't feel like it was appropriate in the core, but it's going to be very easy because the space is very open, and you can get to the floors from below for distributing, waste lines and supply lines to put that wherever we want. I like to organize toilet cores, stairs, elevators, kind of those blocks of building utilities and circulation elements together. But I consider kind of a break area and sink as something that could float out in the space somewhere. But yes, there'll certainly be that kind of a use. But hopefully it'll be light scaled so that they can use the restaurants along Laurel Street for lunchtime activities and that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. And how will that work? Then there's space between the floors that you'll be able to run that where you want it.
Yeah, so our floor-to-floor height, I think, is 12'6" from the 2nd floor to the 3rd floor. And then it's even more than that when we get up to the roof. At the ground floor, as staff already said, we have about 15 feet. So there's plenty of interstitial cavity to be able to run utilities. There's going to be areas in this floor plate when we do the interior design that will have suspended ceilings, and there'll be areas that most likely will have exposed kind of ceiling look. So utilities can run easily in the suspended ceiling areas.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ken, this is Ellen. A question about the roof. One of your slides showed the roof. I wanted to know if we could go back to that. Sure. I'm interested in knowing how much real estate up there does the equipment take?
Very
And
little.
is it going to be enclosed? Is there a parapet? Because some of the people that live across the street live in higher stories. I'd like some clarification there if I could.
Yeah, this actually, thank you, Chair Garvey. This actually came up during staff's review. And we had to show them how we were screening that equipment. So if I may, I think I can draw here. This is the mechanical well over here, and the equipment, is recessed. Can you see what I'm drawing?
I do see that little red line, yes.
So the mechanical equipment is recessed down into that well. That well occurs along the building core. So between the two stairs where the toilets are, that's where this mechanical well is located. The mechanical equipment is probably 5.5 feet tall, but with these VRF systems, they're very, very compact, and we probably have one condenser per floor. And so the footprint's probably 30 by 48 by 5.5 feet tall. It'll be completely concealed inside this well. And you can also see here that the rest of this roof is all available for solar panels up on top.
Oh, I see. Okay, so the air conditioner or the condenser fans or the excess HVAC coming out of the building, that just comes up within that enclosure there.
Correct. So that literally is all inside the footprint of this little raised thing over here.
It is very small.
Yeah, it's amazing. These systems are great.
That's why I went back there. I thought, well, that can't be it. It's too small.
Well, you're right, because normally you see rooftop units that are kind of everywhere on littering the roof with units, and that's not the case here. So basically, these units. So from the 4th floor of 1001 Laurel, those tenants there will not be looking at mechanical equipment. In fact, I believe their windows are around the same height as our roof.
Okay.
So they're completely screened. I have no concerns about that.
Thank you. And my second and last question, maybe for you or maybe for Mike Jones, this has to do with the electric vehicle charging capability that you discussed in the packet. Are these charging stations within the lift? And is the lift able to move all around and still accommodate an electric wire or electric charging capacity?
I can answer that. This is Ken. Unless Mike wants to, but essentially every vehicle in each of the 3 lifts can be EV. And the chargers actually move with each platform. So once the car is on a platform and that platform then has the EV charger on it, that charger stays with the platform and can move throughout the lift. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, those are my words exactly, yes.
So if you charge, well, that's a lot of EV charging capability, which is great from a transportation standpoint. Do you feel you have sufficient electrical capacity to support the charging of that many vehicles? I guess it would be at 110 or something, a lower amp.
It would be a 240, and the chargers that are used on the systems generally are intelligent, and so they can allocate the available power. So when more cars are charging, they can reduce the amount of power going to any one car.
Oh, that makes sense. That's a really smart system.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Those are the only questions I had. I didn't have any questions for the transportation demand management plan, but I just wanted to put on the record that was a really well done and a well prepared plan. So Elizabeth, I know you were the lead on that. I think that was just a really an excellent document, and I enjoyed reading it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that feedback.
Any questions from my colleagues? Any other questions of the applicant or staff before we see how many people are in the waiting room and begin hearing from the public?
I just ask, this is Bradley again. Ken, I guess, would best answer. No doubt you've read all the conditions of approval in the staff report, and you and the owners agree with the commit to doing those.
I have read the conditions of approval, and I only had one question, and actually I forgot to ask staff about this before the hearing. So essentially, condition number 17 and condition number 31, they have to do with how long the approval is good for. And condition 17 says that the approval is shall expire if it is not exercised or extended within 2 years of approval. And in condition 31, it says if it shall expire if it's not exercised or extended within 1 year of approval. And so what is the local ordinance?
I'll ask the staff that.
They both cite the same. I didn't look.
Yes, thank you for that question. And Stephanie might be looking in the code, but generally, or the standard in the code is that it expires 1 year. And then if it's not exercised by the time that 1 year expiration comes up, the applicant can ask for an extension for an additional 2 years. So essentially you could have a maximum of 3 years to extend it. So we can correct those. But if the Planning Commission prefers to automatically give 2 years, we can put that in a condition as well. But generally the requirement, the way the code reads, is that it expires in 1 year with the option to extend for an additional 2 years.
Great, thank you.
I guess I'd say I don't have a strong preference either way, except the building, I think, across the street on Laurel, across Morris, has been covered up and under, I don't know if they're still working on it, but it's been that way for many months.
David Ruffier, a question for the staff. Those construction time limits that we discussed a month or 2 or 3 ago, do those apply for commercial buildings, or was that there was a whole set of proposed construction time limits that we discussed?
Yes, Commissioner Roof, I don't have the ordinance right in front of me, but it was for all construction.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a fairly, I guess that was maybe going to the city council, but there can be neighborhood concern over the length of time it takes to get things constructed, and so the city is gotten pretty interested in making sure there's upper limits on how long it takes.
Any other questions before we hear from the public? All right, Sarah, do we have a feel for how many people are waiting in the waiting room?
We do have one caller.
All right, caller, you can go ahead. Please state your name and that you live in San Carlos, and you'll have 2 minutes to address the commission.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Amy Farkas. I am hospital director for Animal Dental Clinic. So we are the business occupant of the building north of this project. I have one specific and then one relatively more broad question. So the first question is that I see that there are windows set up in the stairwell on the second and third floor on the north side of this building. Do the presence of those windows pose any limitations to our potential for further upward expansion? And this is probably more of a city question than a project question.
Through the chair, just procedurally, if you would like for staff to answer the question, you can just let us know. That's the pleasure of the commission.
Lisa, if you could take the lead in answering that question, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, the windows do not prohibit the adjacent property owner from exercising development rights should they also would like to do something in the future with their building.
Okay. So more broadly, does, other than kind of just physically being an obstacle to work around, does this project present any other limitations for future upward expansion of our building?
Lisa, do you want to take the lead on that response?
Sure. I mean, as far as I can tell, it wouldn't pose any limitations on any type of addition or reconstruction of a project in this location. Of course, it really just depends exactly what you'd like to do. If you're doing non-residential, there are less restrictions on how far your elevation can be from the property line. However, if the project does include, let me just turn off my timer here. If the project doesn't consist, a future project does consist of residential, then there are requirements for pulling the building elevation, the side elevations away from the side yard, the side property lines, depending upon the type of room that is. You know, the certain uses such as bedrooms or kitchens or living rooms have their own independent recesses that are required for residential uses. So if you're interested in sort of scoping out what those requirements are, we'd be happy to answer your questions. You can just contact us at the Planning Commission.
We do have solar panels.
Okay. Is there any means of addressing the impact of the presence of this building on our existing solar panels? Meaning this is going to give us shade much more than we're currently seeing. So we can expect that our PG&E bill will increase as a result of that loss of production.
Lisa, do you want to take the lead in responding to that?
Sure. I don't know if I can give the best answer here, but the fact that an adjacent neighbor has solar panels doesn't in and of itself preclude the ability of an owner to develop under what the code allows. And in this case, you can definitely build additional stories above the first. As far as the impacts to that, it would be a little bit difficult to answer simply because from my understanding, it really depends upon the type of equipment or where that equipment is placed. Maybe there's a more advantageous location or area on the roof plane to possibly relocate those. But I don't think I'm able to answer the question in full. This might be something that can be addressed from our building division in terms of what they might suggest to property owners, because of course you can imagine that this scenario is not uncommon. But in essence, in and of itself, and if our deputy city attorney has any additional information to share, that probably would be helpful. But it would not preclude the applicant from being able to develop on their property.
Amy, did you have anything further before we wrap up your comments here?
Nothing to add, though. It sounds like I may follow up offline on those two issues.
All right, Amy, thank you very much. Sarah, anyone else in the waiting room who'd like to speak?
We do have one more caller.
All right, caller, please, you can address the commission now. Please tell us your name, and you will have about 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Christine, and I'm a resident at 1001 Laurel Street. My concern is regarding our entrance of our garage, knowing that Morris Street is not the biggest street, and driving that in and out every day, I am concerned, and what's not being addressed is within that block, we have our own 1001 parking garage entrance. Then there is a self-service car wash that cars go in and out of. And then next to it, there is a motel that has a parking space adjacent to this new building. I am concerned regarding just the congested traffic that will be coming in the future with the additional, I believe, car spaces that are not allowed. So I just wanted to address that as a concerned resident and citizen of San Carlos, knowing that Morris Street is really not, I mean, they recently put stop signs and, you know, there's a lot of congestion, people walking through it. And now with this new building and our own building, that street, our street is going to be very, very filled with, you know, just cars going in and out, and God knows what will happen if, you know, there is like some sort of accident or whatnot.
Thank you for that. Lisa or Stephanie, if either of you would like to take the lead in addressing that comment.
In terms of can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the access to the site, it is noted just from a technical standpoint that the plans have been reviewed by city departments, including the Department of Public Works, and there was no concern that had been posed to us in the planning department in terms of any increased pedestrian or vehicular safety issues, given the shift, so to speak, in how vehicles will access this property versus how they currently access this property. In terms of number of vehicles, when the land use designations for the site, both at zoning and general plan designations, there was associated environmental impact report that was prepared back when it said this lot can accommodate these types of uses, and it does assess parking in terms of a build out potential. And so with that, that is, for example, one of the, I think, resulting mitigations out of that is implementations of these TDM plans to help reduce those parking impacts, as we discussed in further detail previously. At least I don't know if you have anything else that you'd like to add beyond those points.
No, thank you. I think you covered everything. Thank you.
Christine, any other comments or questions that you had for the commission this evening?
No, I just wanted to note that just being a resident and knowing, driving that every day, not based on your statistics or your reports, I know that when there is a holdup, even within, you know, on El Camino or even on Laurel Street, it gets super congested. It is very hard as a resident to just get in and out of the garage. So in addition to another building with the car lots, and then again, talking through like the other areas on Morris that have parking going in and out with the motel and then the car wash. I just wanted to, you know, point that out because no one was talking about that. We're just talking about the new building, but we have to talk about, you know, the 1001 Laurel Street condominium building and all the other rest of the buildings and that smaller street. So just wanted to have that on record.
Thank you very much, Christine. Yes, cumulative impacts are very important and need to be discussed, and I appreciate you raising that issue. Are there any other callers who would like the opportunity to be heard on this item?
No callers at this time.
Let's give it 15 or 20 or 30 more seconds and just see if people happen to be watching on their computers or watching on local TV. This is the time, if you'd like to talk, to pick up the phone and dial the number that's on the screen. And put forth your comments. Sarah, any other callers?
No, not at this time.
All right.
Harvey, I move to close public comment.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Dugan,
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone,
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ruth,
Yes.
and Chair Garvey.
Yes. All right, we've heard from staff, we've heard from the applicant and the public. Now's the opportunity for us as a commission to discuss the item. Who would like to start?
I'll just say that I am interested in seeing this project approved. I think the owners and the architects and their consultants have done a very thorough job working with our staff to present a very admirable project. It's a handsome architectural statement and some innovations. Hopefully they'll go all electric and have solar panels to start with, and that the stacked parking turns out to be a success, as it has in other places. That's it for me.
Yeah, sure. John Dugan here again. I think it's a handsome building. I think it will fit well in town. We certainly need the Class A office space. Generally supportive, and again, it's nice to see local San Carlos residents getting a nice project done in town. We see a lot of developments from folks from outside our community coming in, and I think this one's a winner, so I'm supportive.
Jim Iacopone here. Just a quick question for staff. In this kind of a development, the alleyway between the new building and the existing buildings to the east, will the city repave that when it's all done, or is that an obligation of the owner as part of the project? How does that work?
Through the chair, that could certainly be a condition of approval for improvements of the alleyway that front this property. One that would be issued as part of the building permit process through the Department of Public Works.
Okay, thank you. You know, it just occurs to me we're going to have a handsome new project. The photos of the alleyway show that it also is probably past its prime. So it seems to me, as part of the development of the whole site, it would be, you know, a good outcome for certainly the width of the property to have that also be ready for the next 20 years, and therefore repaving would be good. But would you know, welcome other members' perspectives.
This is Lisa Porras. I would just add that this is something that the Public Works Division typically comments on, and I may have missed it in case there's a condition in the project. There have been other instances where improvements or bringing a particular paving area up to current standards has been required. So if that's something that is not on here as a condition, we can certainly forward the comment on to the Public Works Division to make sure that they take a look at that and make sure that it's up to current standards.
And David here. Jim, I think that's that was a really nice catch, and indeed the pictures do make that alley look look pretty bumpy, and having that be taken care of, bringing it up to current standards might help with the safety and flow. So I would be supportive of that, of adding that as a condition. And I guess I would like to say that I agree with my fellow commissioners that it's really nice to see this project coming from the applicants, and fulfills a need, and it certainly will be an improvement over what is there now, and will make that part of the street a little bit more vibrant and interesting. So I'm generally supportive, in terms of I always like to look at the neighborhood compatibility and fit, and I guess we don't really have a overall vision for what Laurel Street looks like architecturally. I mean, this is kind of a modern look, while the condo building across the street is sort of a Mediterranean look with towers and arches and stuff. So it's pretty different, but that's okay. But it's kind of a mixture of architectural styles. And there certainly are examples, like we were shown at the beginning, of other modern buildings on Laurel Street. So I guess I'm making the observation that we don't have a theme for the street architecturally, but we can accommodate a variety. And this is a nice looking building unto itself.
And I think that's a good point. And all that's been said, I'll move that the Planning Commission of San Carlos grant the approval for design review, a conditional use permit, the transportation demand management plan, and a waiver to allow a new 21,483 square foot, 3-story mixed use building at 993 Laurel Street, APN 051-358-290 and 051-358-240 for the reasons incorporated in the staff report, and with the conditions in the Code of Compliance certificate and conditional use permit. And I think there were 31 items, and I would add the one about repaving the alley if necessary to work through the Public Works Department.
Don, this is Ellen. Thank you for that. I too want to jump in and support the condition to paving the alley. Commissioner Iacopone, that was an excellent suggestion, and I want to lend my support to that. And before we move to a second, let me just say that I too like this project. I like that it's mixed use, and I'm looking forward to seeing what type of retail establishment chooses to go in down there on the ground floor. I think this project goes a long way towards responding to the demand for downtown office space. It's located near transit. It's located near a lot of amenities. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a really strong transportation demand management plan. And I like the design. When I picked up my packet, I saw the color board there on the cart with the different woods and materials that were going to be used. And I thought they all looked really attractive, and I appreciated the thought. I appreciate the thought that went into picking all of those, and I thought they looked great. So I too am very supportive of this project. And with that, Don, we have your motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Lisa, can we call the roll?
Commissioner Dugan?
Yes.
Commissioner Iacopone?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Root?
Yes.
And Chair Garvey?
Yes. All right, moving on to agenda item number 7, reports, correspondence, and general information. Report on recent city council actions. Lisa, anything for the commission tonight?
Nothing specific to report this evening other than there will be no city council meeting on Monday, August the 10th. The council is on a summer break and they are set to return on Monday, August 24th. It's when they will be back from their recess.
All right. Any planning commission comments or reports? Any comments or reports from any of my colleagues?
Lisa, did you say that we will not have a planning commission meeting on the 17th? Did I miss that?
I didn't get to that yet, but I can definitely confirm that there will not be no, it's totally fine. We don't have planning commission on the 17th. They'll have a little bit of a break. And then the planning commission is set to return on the 7th, I believe, September 7th.
September after Labor Day.
Correct.
It might be that Tuesday.
Let me double check. I was just going to look. I was double checking myself. Just a minute. Correct. Thank you. The Planning Commission's next meeting after tonight will be on Tuesday, September 8th.
All right. Any correspondence from anyone?
Through the chair, there's no correspondence received other than the 3 additional emails that were sent to the commission today.
We did receive those. Yes, thank you.
Item number 6A.
And planning staff comments, reports, and updates on current projects. Lisa, you gave us a good outline of what we can expect or not expect at the next meeting, and then on September the 8th. Anything else to add on top of that?
It looks like we may be able to bring back. We'll be ready to not bring back, but put back on the agenda a new policy regarding vehicle miles traveled. So it looks like staff is currently aiming for the 8th, and as soon as I get more confirmation on that, I'll be sure to update the commissions and send an email update to all of you.
All right. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything? All right.
Good meeting, Chair Ellen.
Adjourned. Thank you.
Nice job, Ellen.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Congratulations.
Well,
have a good summer holiday.
To the applicants.
In September.
Yeah, looking forward to that project.
Thank you all so much.
Congratulations. It's a nice project.
Very much.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Be well, everyone. Goodbye.
Good night.
Bye-bye, Don.